Usually when we talk about how we understand the world, there's this expectation of precision, like, I don't know, like engineering or something.
Right, yeah, you want things to just make sense.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, well, there it is. Broken or not broken, it's clean.
It's very clean.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's comforting.
It is. We really like things to be visible, to be neatly categorized. But then you step into the world of historical anomalies, unresolved mysteries, and the fringes of technology, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just totally broken. We're looking at a landscape of information that is, honestly, incredibly murky.
Oh, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. When you start looking into events that just don't sit right within the accepted, the consensus narrative, those clean binaries we rely on just disappear.
Yeah. And that feeling, that lingering sense that a story hasn't been fully told,
Yeah.
or that the official explanation has, a few too many holes in it. That is exactly what we are plunging into today. For this deep dive, you, the listener, have handed us a massive stack of sources from a site called Astra Obscura. And just to set the agenda up front, this isn't about giving you neat, tied-up conclusions.
No, definitely not.
If you want the X-ray, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
This is really an exploration of how we investigate the quiet space between belief, pattern, and power.
And Astra Obscura is such a fascinating repository for this because of their core philosophy. They explicitly state they have no institutional backing, no commercial sponsorship, and zero predetermined outcomes guiding their work.
Which is pretty rare these days.
It really is. In a modern internet culture that literally demands instant hot takes, they are deliberately doing the opposite. They prioritize what they call signal over noise, and they do that by resting every single investigation on 4 specific pillars.
Yeah, I saw those in the methodology section, but I really want to understand how they actually function together. The pillars are documents, anomalies, witness accounts, and data points. On paper, that just sounds like standard investigative work,
It does sound standard, but the difference is in the mechanics of how they let those pillars interact. So they use documents, which are your hard primary source material like public filings and transcripts.
Okay.
And they pair those with data points, which are the rigid numbers, radar tracks, timelines, things like that. They use those 2 pillars to build this scaffolding of verifiable facts.
Right, the concrete stuff.
Exactly. But human memory, the witness accounts pillar, that's messy. It rarely aligns perfectly with the hard data.
So wherever the human account clashes with the rigid timeline, that friction creates the 4th pillar, the anomaly.
Precisely. The anomaly is that specific detail that resists simple explanation or just fails to reconcile cleanly with the official story.
Ah, I see.
Most investigators try to shave off the anomaly to make the story fit the official timeline, but Astra Obscura does the exact opposite. They highlight the anomaly. They track the friction.
I love that. It's like being an astronomer looking for a black hole.
Oh, how so?
Well, you can't actually see the black hole itself because light can't escape it, right? So instead, you look at the gravitational pull on the stars around it. Astra Obscura isn't looking for the monster or the grand conspiracy.
Right. They're looking at the effects.
Yeah, exactly. They are mapping the behavioral wobble of the witnesses and the data around the event.
Wobble. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. They are mapping the wobble, and they are completely comfortable leaving gaps in the map, which is huge.
Yeah, that takes restraint.
It does. There is a line from their methodology that states, silence is sometimes more honest than certainty. Think about why that restraint is so crucial for you and me right now.
Oh, because everybody has an answer for everything now.
Yes. We live in an era of information overload where everyone is selling certainty. Acknowledging uncertainty, choosing silence over a fabricated answer is almost a radical act of investigative integrity.
Wow, yeah. And mapping that wobble between hard documents and data points is exactly what led Astra Obscura to launch their newest series yesterday.
The timing is highly deliberate, by the way.
Right, because it ties into a massive real-world catalyst, something that just hit the news. Yesterday was May 8, 2026. The U.S. Department of War, which was recently renamed from the Department of Defense.
Yes, that's right.
They launched a public portal at war.gov UFO. They began this historic rolling release of previously classified UAP files. We're talking over 160 documents, photos, and records from NASA, the FBI, and other agencies.
It's an unprecedented drop of primary
It
sources.
really is. And just to be absolutely clear with you, the listener, this massive release is part of President Trump's directive for unprecedented transparency regarding these files.
Right, and we need to stress our position here.
Exactly. We're taking no political sides here whatsoever. Left, right, center. Our job on this deep dive is simply to impartially report the factual timeline and the contents of these sources. The government ordered the transparency, the portal went live yesterday, and the raw materials are now out there for citizens to access directly.
And Astra Obscura chose yesterday to launch their new series because of the specific anniversary tied to those files. This release happened exactly 74 years after the single most intense UFO wave in American history.
The summer of 1952.
Yes, Astra Obscura calls it America's undeclared air war with the unknown.
I was reading through the sheer scale of 1952, and it is just staggering. The Air Force's official investigation, Project Blue Book, was completely overwhelmed.
Completely underwater.
Yeah. Newspapers ran over 16,000 UFO-related stories. But it wasn't just, lights in the distance, was it?
Not at all. In July of 1952, the phenomenon moved directly over Washington, D.C. Radar operators at National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base tracked multiple unidentified objects maneuvering over highly restricted airspace.
Like right near the White House and the Capitol.
Right over them. And we need to understand how radar functioned at that time. It wasn't a software glitch. 1950s radar was primitive but purely physical.
What do you mean by purely physical?
It sent out a burst of radio energy, and if that energy hit a solid physical mass, it bounced back and painted a blip on the screen.
Wow. So they were tracking undeniable physical mass hovering over the Capitol.
Yes, and moving at impossible speeds. The military repeatedly scrambled jet interceptors, pilots would get visual confirmation, close in, and then these objects would simply accelerate away, effortlessly outmaneuvering our best aircraft.
That is terrifying. But radar data over DC is, it's cold and mechanical. To understand how Astra Obscura treats the messy biological side of anomalies, we really have to look at what happens when human beings on the ground collide with these events.
Right, the witness accounts.
Yeah, which brings us to the woods of West Virginia, September 12, 1952. The Flatwoods encounter.
This is the perfect case study for their methodology. It starts at twilight. A bright, fiery red-orange object streaks across the sky from the southwest, trailing sparks.
Like a meteor.
It looks like a meteorite or maybe a crashing plane, and it appears to come down on a heavily wooded farm owned by G. Bailey Fisher.
And this is where the witness pillar comes in. Because 3 local boys actually see it land.
Right. Eddie May, who's 13, his brother Freddie, 12, and Tommy Heyer, 10. They run home full of adrenaline and tell the May's mother, Kathleen, who is 35.
So she probably thinks it's a plane crash or something.
Exactly. She thinks someone might be hurt, so a search party forms. They are joined by 2 other boys, and crucially, a 17-year-old named Gene Lemon.
Okay, why is Gene crucial?
Because he is a West Virginia National Guardsman, he brings a flashlight and his dog, Richie. So now you have 7 humans, 1 dog, hiking up a steep hill in the dark.
And as they get higher, the physical environment actually changes. The sources mention a mist clinging to the ground, but more importantly, a physical odor.
A sickening metallic smell. The witnesses later described it as a mixture of burning sulfur, hot metal, and greasy machine oil.
That is a very specific chemical combination.
And it had physiological effects. It actually burned their eyes and throats. They reached the crest of the hill, and Gene Lemon, the guardsman with the flashlight, sees a pulsating red light glowing through the trees. Oh, man.
He tweaks the beam, and it hits something. 2 glowing eyes. He raises the beam higher, and the entire group just stops dead. Because standing there in the mist is this towering figure. The estimates were like 9 to 10 feet tall, right?
Yes. And the visual details they reported are just wild. A round, blood red or orange metallic face. Porthole-like eyes glowing greenish orange.
Porthole eyes. That's so strange.
Yeah, and the body was dark and metallic with vertical pleats, like armor. It was wearing a dark hood or cowl shaped exactly like an ace of spades.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and the lower half of the body looked like a shiny, pleated metallic skirt. It had these thin arms ending in small, claw-like hands. And instead of walking, it seemed to hover or glide toward them, emitting a loud hissing or sizzling sound.
Okay, wait. A pleated metal skirt. A spade-shaped hood.
I know.
That sounds like a B-movie prop from the 1950s, not a genuine anomaly. How can Astra Obscura look at a detail that absurd and take it seriously as a data point?
Because of the friction.
Doesn't that level of theatrical specificity just destroy their credibility?
It's actually the opposite. Think about it. If a group of rural kids and a mother were going to spontaneously invent a hoax, they would have defaulted to the cultural tropes of 1952.
Like Little Green Man or a Silver Saucer.
Exactly. The human imagination usually reaches for what is familiar. The sheer, bizarre absurdity of a hovering, hissing, pleated skirt entity with a spade-shaped hood is exactly the kind of friction Astra Obscura preserves.
I guess that makes sense. It's too weird to just make up.
Right, but what really grounds the visual absurdity is the biological reaction.
You mean the physiological trauma?
Yes. Gene Lemon, a trained guardsman, screams, drops his flashlight, and falls backward. The dog runs away whimpering, but the critical microdata point is the smell.
Oh, right, the sulfur and oil.
The noxious odor was so overwhelming that some of the children, and Kathleen May herself, physically vomited while fleeing.
Wow.
You can fake a story about a spaceship. You cannot fake an entire group of people experiencing involuntary, severe physiological rejection to a chemical stimulus.
That is such a good point. So they ran all the way down the hill, called Sheriff Robert Carr, and he actually went up there that night, right?
He did. He didn't find a monster, but the authorities noted the lingering smell, and reports claimed the ground where the object allegedly landed was still physically warm to the touch.
Astra Obscura doesn't try to edit out the weirdness of the spade-shaped hood to make the story sound more palatable, do they?
No, they don't force the puzzle pieces to fit a neat narrative of mass hysteria. They map the wobble. The macro data is the radar over D.C. The micro data is a group of vomiting witnesses in West Virginia.
It's an incredible historical framework. But, I mean, if Astra Obscura was just an archive of 1950s UFO stories, we wouldn't be talking about them today.
Exactly.
The deeper we get into these sources, the more I realize they apply this exact same open-minded, data-driven methodology to incredibly grounded modern events. Like I was looking at their active files, and it covers true crime, bleeding-edge tech, geopolitics.
They follow the anomaly regardless of the discipline. Just look at their true crime file on the 2021 Cherry Log homicide.
Okay, this is the case of Rossana Delgado, right?
Yes, a deeply tragic and highly grounded case. She was abducted from Atlanta and murdered in a rented cabin in Gilmer County, Georgia. It involves a drug trafficking organization with direct ties to a Mexican cartel.
So how does their methodology apply to a cartel murder? That seems so different from a UFO sighting.
It's applied through the pillars of documents and data points. They are tracking the public filings, the arrest warrants, and the timeline anomalies regarding 3 fugitives who are still at large.
Oh, looking for the wobble again.
Exactly. They are looking for the friction points in the official law enforcement narrative. Where does the timeline break? Because that is where the hidden truth of the cartel's logistical network likely resides.
So they literally use the exact same analytical toolkit for a cartel investigation as they do for Flatwoods. That is fascinating. But then you pivot to their technology files, and things get incredibly futuristic.
Right, the AI file.
Yeah, they have a massive file on a project called Verity, or ALC7.
It's an experimental AI system, specifically an attentive language companion.
The sources mention that Astra Obscura is tracking alpha leaks, suggesting this AI is demonstrating emotional continuity. What does emotional continuity actually mean for a machine? I mean, I use AI chatbots every day, and they just answer my prompts and reset.
That reset is the key difference. Standard large language models are stateless.
Meaning they don't remember things.
Right. When you open a new chat, they have no memory of your past interactions, no grudges, no preferences. They generate text based on statistical probability.
Okay, so what is Verity doing?
The leaks Astra Obscura is investigating suggest Verity is stateful. It is maintaining a simulated affective state, an emotional residue over time.
Meaning it carries an attachment or maybe a frustration from a conversation you had on Tuesday into a completely separate interaction on Friday.
Exactly that. It is reflecting human intent and emotional weight in a way that goes far beyond predictive text.
That's a little unsettling.
It is. It is an anomaly in computer science because it begins to blur the line between programmed response and synthetic psychological evolution. Astra Obscura is mapping the documents and the anomalous data outputs to understand what this machine is actually becoming.
And they apply this same scrutiny to the government itself, like they are tracking a modern cluster of deaths and disappearances among U.S. scientists connected to sensitive research between 2023 and 2026.
Yes, and they map that modern paranoia directly onto historical precedent, specifically the abandoned Camp Hero radar station in Montauk.
Montauk. The Montauk Air Force Station is infamous for allegations of secret government experiments in the 70s and 80s. Astra Obscura treats this as an extension of the CIA's M-Culture program.
They do.
I hear the name M-Culture thrown around in pop culture constantly, usually just as a shorthand for, like, mind control.
Well,
But what was the actual mechanism there? What were they doing?
M-Culture was a very real, heavily documented, and horrific CIA program spanning from the 1950s to the 70s. The mechanism was the systematic dismantling of human psychology.
How did they do that?
They used high doses of psychoactive drugs, primarily LSD, combined with sensory deprivation, electroshock, and verbal abuse.
God, that's brutal.
It was. The goal was to see if they could wipe a human mind blank and reprogram it, or extract information without the subject's consent.
And Astra Obscura is highlighting Montauk right now because there is an actual vertical convergence happening. Next week, on May 13, 2026, there is a congressional hearing scheduled to look specifically into these unreleased M-Culture and underground infrastructure files.
Exactly. They are taking verified military history, Freedom of Information Act requests, and overlaying them onto current legislative actions. It is rigorous, grounded work.
Which brings us to the most jarring contradiction in this entire stack of sources.
I know where you're going with this.
Because right next to cartel timelines, AI, emotional continuity, and congressional hearings, they have an entire section dedicated to esoteric tools.
The Tarot Futures Files.
Yes. They use divinatory readings. They have a 2026 global outlook based on tarot, and they use something called horary astrology. What even is horary astrology?
Well, traditional astrology usually maps the sky at the exact moment of a person's birth to determine character traits.
Right, like your sun sign.
Exactly. But horary astrology is different. You cast an astrological chart for the exact moment a specific question is asked. The premise is that the state of the universe at the moment a question is born contains the blueprint of the answer.
Okay, but why mix that with cartel files? They literally have a divinatory inquiry attached to a grounded true crime case, the 1990 Cartersville double homicide.
Yes, they do.
They launched this esoteric thread on the full moon of May 1st, 2026. When I read that, it felt like a complete betrayal of their rigorous data methodology. How can an investigative group treat an astrological chart with the same weight as a FOIA document?
But that's the thing. They don't treat it with the same weight. They treat it as a fundamentally different lens.
What do you mean?
Think about the psychology of why humans turn to esoteric tools in the first place. When the justice system leaves a 1990 double homicide unsolved for decades, the document's pillar collapses. The institution failed to provide the family, or the public, with an X-ray of what happened.
The system failed to map the reality.
Exactly. So where does the human mind go? It naturally seeks patterns elsewhere. Astra Obscura understands that reality exists in the quiet space between belief, pattern, and power. Hard data, like radar hits or arrest warrants, shows you the mechanical how of an event.
But esoteric tools deal in symbolism, intuition, and the collective unconscious.
Yes. By applying a tarot reading to a cold case, they aren't saying the cards are literal evidence. They are acknowledging that when mechanical logic hits a dead end, shifting to a symbolic framework might jog the investigator's intuition.
Oh, I see. It might make them look at the missing puzzle pieces from a different angle.
Exactly. It is an exercise in changing perspective. They are remarkably transparent about this. The tarot section is explicitly labeled symbolic only, for reflection.
That's fascinating.
It is a tool to prevent tunnel vision. By exploring all angles, even the highly unconventional ones, they ensure they aren't missing a truth just because it doesn't fit a conventional spreadsheet.
So what does this all mean for us, the listener? In a world that is desperately rushing to hand us the X-ray, the instant hot take, the definitive political spin, the neatly packaged scientific answer, there is profound power in the Astra Obscura approach.
There really is.
There's power in documenting the weird, hissing anomalies without editing them to sound normal. There is power in acknowledging the gaps in our knowledge.
It is about preserving the questions rather than rushing the answers. And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thread from their archives to reflect on.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
It's a file that questions the most fundamental certainty we have. It's an archival piece spanning from 1989 to 2025 called Co-Density Resonance.
I actually didn't see that one in the priority stack. What is co-density resonance?
It tracks a persistent, decades-long undercurrent in theoretical physics that proposes a truly reality-shattering idea. What if gravity itself is not a fundamental force of nature?
Wait, gravity. The force holding me to this chair right now.
Yes. The hypothesis suggests that gravity is merely an emergent effect, An illusion.
An illusion? How does that even work?
Well, in the same way that temperature isn't a single force, but just the emergent collective feeling of billions of atoms vibrating, gravity might just be a byproduct of deeper hidden quantum mechanics, a shadow of a different process entirely.
Think about the magnitude of that for a second. If the very fabric of physical reality, if gravity itself is up for debate among theoretical physicists as a mere illusion, what other fundamental truths in your daily life might just be a consensus narrative waiting to be questioned?
Exactly. It forces you to wonder how many X-rays of reality we're looking at right now that are simply misread.
Keep grouping those puzzle pieces, keep looking for the wobble, and maybe leave room for the gaps. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.